The changes in the education sector, the way we assess students, the rise of digitalization and artificial intelligence, the changes in the learning environment, and many other unusual and controversial questions. We will be examining them one after the other in this channel. My name is Daniel Wiśniewski, and this is Education Chapter. Welcome to Education Chapter. My name is Daniel Wiśniewski. I am here with Professor Chandra Luitel, far away from Nepal. Professor, thank you very much for accepting the invitation to chat with us at the Education Chapter.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Professor, you're a reformer. We're going to talk about teaching math. And mathematics is a field in which I think everyone has certain experience. I mean, if you remember any teacher from a school, normally that teacher will be a math teacher. Math teachers have a reputation for being tough, for being disciplined, for being like those people that you really remember. And mathematics per se, as a field of teaching, is considered the most important and also the most difficult. And yet, your approach to teaching mathematics is different. You're a reformer of teaching math. So before we get to it, I'm going to ask you a question about how is math being taught in Nepal? No.
Thank you very much, Daniel. In Nepal right now, if you ask me, many of Nepali classrooms, math teachers standing in front of the students, doing abstract algorithmic mathematics, step by step, and asking students to copy the same. So this is standard sort of teaching mathematics if you ask me this question.
So this is exactly like I was taught mathematics in 1990s in Poland. So I would have a teacher with a chalk telling me 6 times 5 is 30, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Like it's sort of in an abstract form. And
yes.
And yet, this way of teaching often discourages people to actually go into mathematics and in general into science. I remember I had similar stories with fields that later on started being exciting to me, like physics or chemistry. When I was taught physics or chemistry, normally what was also very abstract. It was about memorizing definitions, different laws of physics, different substances, how the substances would somehow react with each other, and so on and so on. But yet, nowadays, there's an entire discussion of redefining this teaching of science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And so what inspired you, first of all, what inspired you to work on this, really?
Actually, I've been prepared to become a math teacher. I did my, first degree from Nepal, and I was taught the way as you explained and as I explained earlier. Okay, it was pretty much dry, teacher-centric, didactic, algorithmic. That kind of learning was there, and I was of the view that mathematics should be taught that way. But when I started doing master's research, then I found other possibilities that mathematics is not entirely that kind of dry subject, and it should not be, because it is human production. And if there is human production, if there is human involvement, there should be time, there should be, people, there should be events associated with the development of mathematics. That's how, I changed my perception some 21 years back, when I did my second master's from Curtin University, and I did a project on narrative sort of inquiry, narrative exploration of mathematical learning. So that gave me a kind of sense that mathematics can be taught by using narratives, storytelling.
But how can you teach math through storytelling? I mean, I remember from a school, one story that I remember from a school was about the Eureka story. I know that this philosopher jumped out naked out of the bathtub and said, Eureka! And that's the only story I think I remember from the math class. Well, how can you really use narratives in order to teach mathematics?
Of course, there are many ways, actually, many forms of narrative many forms of narratives that can be used. One is just you said, so how mathematics unfolded over the period of time. Then you use, historical narratives. But what I'm saying here is not just historical narratives, but other forms of people's narrative, everyday narratives. For example, in a recently completed project, we used gardening as an approach, in which students, engaged in building the gardens, vegetable gardens. They raise bed, and then they also measure the height of the plant, and they sowed in graph, and they tell a story about it. So what happened in the first day? So how did they work with that plant? So partly it was science, partly it was mathematics, partly it was more of science and mathematics, maybe more of art of storytelling, how they learn mathematical skills, and how they learn scientific skills, and also how they design something very much close to technology or engineering. So in this way, they sort of they immerse in the context, in the activities, and they came up with a story of learning, of doing something that is very much connected with mathematics.
Do I understand correctly? You would like to take mathematics classes out of the classes and see, maybe not fully, but there would be this kind of special classes, let's say, where we go to a garden and we use mathematical skills that we have learned in the class to, I don't know, calculate the amount of fertilizer to, well, I don't know, to put it next to the plants in order for them to grow in a certain way, or the amount of water we have to give them in order for them to grow properly. Of course, this is an interesting story, but now, how is that then related to to this traditional way of teaching math? Is that how can we make sure that this specific applications can actually lead to an educational attainment? How do we measure that even?
Actually, thank you very much for this question. We sort of take here the idea of John Dewey's idea of experiential learning. So here students experience something and come to the class and discuss this, reflect it, and reflect on the activities, and then make meaning out of it. And this is not just teacher giving demonstration. Then the students come to the class and plot the graph, show the graph, and then, connect with their algorithmic problem solving. So it might take some time, it might take a little longer than traditional learning approach. But what happens when they learn something, for example, growth, if they learn percentage in depth, they understand proportion. You don't need to invest much more time for other content as well. If you go in depth in one particular content using this storytelling, experiential learning approach.
Do you have any other stories? I think that, before we started the recording, you mentioned here that some students are also learning mathematics in the marketplace. How is that looking normally?
This is very, it might be a case of many places, but in our case, the farmers produce vegetables, and the vegetables are sold to middlemen, and the middlemen take to Kathmandu's popular marketplace. And what happens in between, like the price goes fourfold. For example, the per kilo vegetable, tomato in Kavri, it's not that far from Kathmandu, maybe 30, 40 kilometers from here, where I'm staying right now, cost around 15 rupees. But when the middleman brings to the marketplace in Kathmandu, it goes like 60 rupees. Teachers and students investigated why this is happening. And this looks like very basic, very common sense initially. But when we start discussing the profit and how much profit is actually ethical, then when we put these questions, then students and teachers come with several alternative explanations. Okay, so this is unethical, or this should not be like this. So then their values and their ethical standpoints become much clearer. And then we had a project called when vegetable travels from, in Nepali, it was something like that. If I translate in English, when tomato travels from farmland to marketplace. Okay, so the students had a sense of story, sense of narrative, you know, and then they came up with their own narratives. Okay, how their parents are selling to the middlemen, and how possibly the middlemen are minting money out of their you know, labor. So it is mathematics, but it is more than mathematics. Okay? So there they came up with the idea that, okay, so for example, we say mathematics is simply numbers. No, it is more than numbers. Mathematics is more than numbers, more than expressions. There is human dimensions. When we talk about human dimension, there is a dimension of justice, there is a dimension of ethics, morality, and so on and so forth. It's more of social dimensions as well. So you might ask this question, then what about competence? We are not saying we should compromise on competence. I think this would raise the competence even better, because they understand mathematics in relation to their everyday lives. So that's where these narratives are very, very helpful.
It seems that this would be also provoking a certain deep learning there, isn't it?
Yes,
Because it's
yes,
not just about memorizing certain laws,
yes,
certain
yes,
constructs, mathematical constructs, logarithms and stuff like that,
yes, yes,
or sums or multiplies or whatever, but also knowing how you can really apply those, and also it shows you how useful this is. I remember, well, you know, I was privileged enough to receive a lot of very, very high level education. I finished an MBA, and I remember when one thing that I've learned that I started to understand numbers, because what you do in this kind of project-based learning, you actually learn and you kind of start feeling how numbers represent the reality. And I think that
yes,
this is an interesting case because you're trying to do that in a school context. Now, the
yes,
question is,
yes.
as of when can you really do this kind of methodologies? Is there any preferred age for the children to start playing with those, playing with those numbers or those applications of mathematics in different learning environments?
Yes, thank you, Daniel. What we came up, you know, in my research group at Kathmandu University, we look into these different sort of subject identities, if you like, math teacher, science teacher, English teacher, language teacher, so on and so forth. And they build partly, to a large extent, they build themselves as egoist individual, egoist experts, and they bring their subjects before their themselves. So this is called, disciplinary egocentrism. So when you start teaching children subjects, when subjects become important, disciplines become important, then learning for us, learning disappear, actually, deep learning disappears. So we should start from early grades, you know, from early childhood. Even it should continue until undergraduates as well, even masters, if for that matter. Okay, we don't say that there is no need of disciplines. We need disciplinary orientation, but we should not be promoting disciplinary orientation at the cost of, you know, deep learning. For example, if you compare physics and mathematics as a discipline at a higher level, they are all connected. If you compare linguistics, music, and mathematics, they are all connected. Computational linguistics is there. Music is there, where mathematics has very important role to form, the basis of the codes and other things. So I think at the top level, at the level of disciplinary sophistication, there is always a connection. But we start in a very wrong way with the assumption that if we do this kind of thing, if we teach like this, and they will all meet together and they form a kind of immersive context. No, they don't do. They become burden.
Right.
I don't mean to say that here. I don't mean to say that we should avoid disciplines. No, disciplines should exist, but they should not exist as egocentric, egocentric silos. They should work together. They collaborate together.
I
So,
remember, recently when I did not experience this in my school, but I want to share a personal story. I was always passionate about different things. And I was not a very good student in the school context when I was a student, when I was a pupil. But with age maturing, I've realized how exciting learning is. And I've discovered these because of the connections between different fields that I've been taught in isolation. And I've always been interested in multiple things. And what I'm trying to say here is I'm neither a humanist, which says language, letters, history, but I was also excited about engineering, about mathematics, about astronomy, and so on. So I never fit to a system, really. I sort of felt that I am being taught this in isolation. And in fact, until recent years, I've kind of came to a conclusion that, well, if we are teaching literature is like a mirror of certain times in history. So you cannot really teach literature in isolation from history. Because normally, if you're a writer, you write in a certain societal moment. And you're showing that historical moment through your own eyes and letters. The same in science side. You cannot really teach math without understanding what's physics and astronomy and basic engineering and so on and so on. All interrelated.
I just want to add here, because we teach history, in school we teach history, social studies, but we teach in isolation. For example, what happens if we say 2000 years back, what would be the population of Kathmandu Valley? They use imagination. That's how mathematical faculty is developed. Not just doing algorithm, but also helping them to imagine what would be the flora, what would be the status of flora and fauna, what kind of animals would be available at that time. Then they may go deep into science as well, not just in historical facts. So we need to make those facts more like actions rather than facts in themselves. So oftentimes social studies, histories, literature are taught as though they are facts in that particular time. Let them convert into action so that they can connect with what happens today, and the basis of which is what happened at that time. So we also work with social studies teachers and language teachers as well. So connecting poem with mathematics, the phenomenon are given. For example, there is a poem about going temple and critiquing the people becoming more, temple-centric rather than people who are downtrodden. So, and then in that context, it evokes interesting emotion as well, very useful emotion. So how would you help downtrodden people? How much you spend in charity? So this is again, involves mathematics, involves number, and then they also plot those, individual charity, what they prefer in a bar diagram, in graph, in sort of pattern, and they try to discuss, they make meaning. So these kind of possibilities are possible. So we don't mean to say that we should limit when there is disciplinary, boundary, it's less likely to happen. But if we make the boundary little faded, and then they can think beyond their disciplines, and they also connect their disciplines with other disciplines. So this should happen through dialogue between teachers. Teachers should talk each other, like science teachers talking to English teachers, or Nepali teachers, or social studies teachers, or math teachers. And from there, they can develop a sense of commonalities or differences as well. Differences are also very important. If you study plant, you measure the plant, and also you measure, you also understand the plant in a holistic manner. So type, the shape of leaf, and the photosynthesis process, the root, the nature of root, and the nature of stem, flower, and so on and so forth. So It's both. It's mathematics of quantity and also of quality of that particular object. So we focused more on it. Traditionally in mathematics, we didn't focus much on quality. We focus on quantity.
I see.
And one thing
Yeah.
we have this theory here, if you read the history and philosophy of mathematics, especially in Nazi time, what they did, they employed lots of mathematicians to do lab work. And these mathematicians, they never thought of the ethical parameters, ethical side. So they did whatever the Nazis told them. When they went to America, they left Germany and they went to America. They did the same in America. They developed, nuclear bombs.
Right.
So, of course, many people may not like this argument or may not agree with what I'm saying, but
But there's an
this is
ethical element to mathematics as well.
yes,
Right.
yes.
Right. And human.
So when
human
you
element there.
introduce,
Very-
when you introduce narrative, then there is a possibility that you connect culture, you connect morals, you connect ethics of that particular community,
Yeah,
and
you can
evoke,
connect mathematics to it.
yeah, mathematics too. And mathematics in a deeper sense. Okay,
Right.
it is not just number. 15 rupees per
It
kilogram
represents
tomato,
reality.
yeah, becomes like 60, 60 rupees per
Right.
kilo
Right.
in 60 kilometers apart. So how is it possible? Then there is a story. And there should
Right.
be several stories, not just one. So this is what we meant to say when we say mathematics or we say STEAM education.
This is super interesting. Paul, my question, you said teachers. Now,
Mhm.
you said that there's a disciplinary egoism.
Mhm.
How do we have to train teachers to be this? I remember, I give you an example. I remember a movie where there was a history teacher who was teaching history through kind of alternative methods. He was organizing battle reconstructions. He was doing the defense of Socrates. He did it in the class. So one of them was a Socrates, and they were accusing him, and so on. There was this discussion and so on. So there are lots of alternative ways. But most teachers are not being taught to teach this way, or they are not being prepared for that. So the question is there something we can do to address this?
Definitely, Daniel. The place, the place of reform, I think, is teacher education program. Because I'm also the dean of School of Education, Kathmandu University, we have been sort of developing these pedagogies in our programs. Of course, we have a very small university, small faculty, but we have been working with our partners from several other universities and also with the schools and showcasing what I said earlier about school garden, about profit making, from 15 rupees per kilo to 60 rupees. So these all are activities in a school cluster and collaboration with teachers. So from our university teachers with school teachers. So we have been working. It is not easy because the way we've been taught comes with huge price, meaning that why I'm saying huge price, there is a sense of there is a view of education, particular view of education, and that needs to be changed. The view that education knowledge should be given by teachers. I think teachers have a very important role to play. I don't mean to say that teachers should not give any kind of knowledge, but teachers need to create conditions, wait to see students developing with their, understanding, their funds of knowledge through narratives, through storytelling, through examples of their experiences. Then the deep learning is possible. So, and that is possible only when teachers are prepared that way. If teachers are prepared using lecture method, and you cannot imagine teachers doing discovery learning or experiential learning, teachers should also be placed in the context of experiential learning, problem solving, problem-based learning, project-based learning, inquiry-based learning. So we are trying to do that, I think this is the shift needed. I don't know about Europe, because many of the teacher education institutions who have been collaborating in Norway and also in Denmark, also in Finland, they seem to be focusing more on inquiry-based learning, and student-centered pedagogies. Of course, in Nepal, we are in urgent need of shifting this traditional rote memorization approach to more meaning-centered approach to learning.
For the deep learning, yes.
Yes,
But
yes.
I'm going to come back to one more question which we touched upon.
Yeah.
Because I want to really finalize this talk a little bit with this reconceptualization of the learning environments and why we do it. Now, one of the ways that we see education is a path of signaling skills for professional reasons, really. And of course, this approach kind of limits the dignity of it, let's say, because ultimately the purpose of it is to, well, get through the assessment, get good grades, showcase on the labor market that you are a person who has certain skills, and kind of signal your abilities. Now, we mentioned here a little bit about the assessment. One of the faults, in my view, of education is that it often is a preparation for the assessment rather than actually a place where we are fostering deep learning and this interconnections between different subjects. How do we have to then reconceptualize the assessment part in order for this to make it a reality? Because without that, the schools will continue being the preparatory courses or preparatory institutions for the assessment itself.
Okay, thank you very much. Very, very important question, because as there is a saying in English, tails wag the dog. Like assessment, guides our assessment, our pedagogical process. Although it should be other way around, but it is a major problem. I think we need to reconceptualize assessment from the perspective of authentic learning and authentic, demonstration of their skills and knowledge. In our context, I would like to give examples of our context. In recent times, we have changed school curricula. From grade 1 to 3, we have more of integrated curricula, and then we have used a kind of 1 to 4 Likert scale, like 1 being the worst and 4 being the best. So we need to see the outcomes, whether outcomes are demonstrated or not in these grade levels. From 4 to 8, we have also a mixed, partly teacher-led assessment would be driven by these outcomes based, and the end of the year assessment would be more like a metric kind, like, number of questions and also grade 9. These are all teacher-made assessment, okay, apart from grade 8, grade 10, and grade 12. But what is important here, as you raised, is that we need to reconceptualize this assessment model. So in Nepal, people are in 2 camps. One, they say, no, we need these exams. We need to control. The other would say, of course, they are in minority like me, we should focus on learning. Learning is important, then assessment. Of course, we might do assessment differently. Okay, so that would be, and then the question comes, okay, so we need resources, we need to manage this and that. So do we privilege managerialism over learning? That's my question. So teachers should be made responsible. Teachers should assess. If they are able to teach, then they should be able to assess. In many universities, what happens, you might have that experience, you said MBA. So in MBA, I think your professor assessed you, not somebody external one. So I do the same with my master's and MPhil and PhD students. I assess them apart from PhD thesis, which is sent to the external examiners. Of course, I'm also part of the assessment process of my one student, because this is where credibility comes. Credibility doesn't come from external assessment. Of course, we might have some portion of external assessment, maybe 30%, but 70% should be given to teachers, and teachers should be prepared to assess their students.
According to
plan
the typical methods that they use.
Yes, because, for example, the project that I shared earlier, if students are engaged in understanding profit and loss and the profit and ethics, profit and morality, then probably the external examiner wouldn't understand, would not have that ability to understand what went on inside the classroom. So the teachers should be, leveraged, I would say leveraged, not just privileged, but leveraged with resources and kind of, training and facilities so that they can assess their students in a fair manner. Because that's how, even if I become external examiner of somebody, then I need to be fair as much as the teacher should be fair inside the classroom. So it is more about teacher judgment, reclaiming teacher judgment. I think there is no alternative to it if we are to promote deep learning, because that's the way teachers need to be prepared, and teachers need to prepare their students as well.
Thank you for sharing your story. I must tell you, I think it's very inspirational what you just told me, is that we need to rethink the way we learn. We need to rethink, we need to see actually how the learning process takes place. And indeed, I think it's something that most of the education systems have to look into, which is how can we really promote the deep learning? And if we really have that focus, then the entire spectrum of questions will arise concerning the organization of the school, the preparation of the teachers, and so on and so on. So I really hope and I really wish your vision of education and your attempts to reform the way mathematics in general, but in all the STEM related subjects in Nepal are being taught will be a successful one. And thanks you very much for sharing it with us here at the Education Chapter. To our viewers, I think it was really a great inspiration to have Professor Luitel with us. If you like what you see, subscribe, comment what you think about this. Can we really teach math in a way that has been presented here? Is it better or worse? What was your experience in the mathematics class? Did you like it or not? Share it with us. Subscribe. Share the video if you like it, because this really does help us to spread the news about this channel. And for the time being, Professor, thanks a lot for your time, for this inspiration, and really good luck with your efforts to change the way mathematics is being taught in Nepal.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. Thank you. Okay.